Let's talk about some of the people who were directly around the Idaho 4 victims before they lost their lives, and whether or not one or more of them may have had a motive. Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about the people who were actually around the victims in the Idaho 4 case in their everyday lives, who may or may not have had a motive. People who may have had problems with these roommates. Now, I'm not saying that any of these individuals are guilty of anything. I'm just making an observation that there were certain things that were going on in the lives of these victims, and maybe that led up to these crimes. Now, today I'm going to be talking about some people, and I want to say before I start this video that by no means am I accusing anyone of doing anything. I'm not saying that anybody is guilty of anything at all. It's very possible that these people had nothing to do with the Idaho 4 crimes. But there were some issues going on between these individuals and these victims right before they lost their lives. So I think that it's important that we talk about it. I want to begin with Kaylee and Jack D's breakup. Kaylee had just broken up with Jack D 3 weeks before these crimes occurred. And Jack's aunt stated in an interview that Jack was pretty upset about all of this, which would make sense. Kaylee and Jack were together for 5 years. They were high school sweethearts. So the Gonsalves family even said that Kaylee and Jack were just taking a break. Christy Gonsalves stated that she believed that Kaylee and Jack would get married one day and start a family, that they were just taking a break. But Kaylee had unfollowed Jack on her social networks, so she wasn't even following him, which seems odd if they were still friends. Now, it's also been said that Kaylee broke up with Jack because she was moving to Texas for her job in Austin. Now, that would make sense. Maybe she didn't want a long distance relationship. But she was dating after she broke up with Jack. She was dating locally, or at least trying to. So, which would make sense. I mean, this is a 20-year-old young woman. It just seems odd that she would break up with Jack because she was moving out of state and then start dating other people. I mean, if she wanted to be with someone and she was happy with Jack D, it seems like she would have just stayed in that relationship. But she didn't. This is just my opinion and from some of the research that I've done. But I believe that Jack D was crushed by this breakup. And maybe he wasn't. Maybe Jack was dating as well. But in my opinion, I believe that he was really hurt over what happened with Kaylee. Young love can be brutal, Losing your first love, your first girlfriend, can be devastating. And I think that Jack was probably badly hurt from Kaylee's decision to break up with him. Now, we know that Kaylee had moved out of the King Roadhouse. She wasn't living in the King Roadhouse anymore. She had only gone back that weekend to show Maddie her new car, as well as attend a party with Dylan. So Kaylee had moved away from the King Roadhouse. She wasn't living there anymore. Her belongings were still there, and her lease was paid up until the end. But she had moved out of the neighborhood. So I always thought that that was kind of interesting, that Kaylee broke up with Jack and then she moved out of the neighborhood. Now, we also know that Jack D lived right down the street from the King Roadhouse. He basically lived just a real short walk away. So I've always wondered if maybe Kaylee moved out because of the breakup with Jack D and something that may have been going on after that breakup happened. Another reason that I thought that it was strange that Kaylee moved out before the end of the semester, right before the end of the semester, is that this would have been, it seems as though this would have been when Kaylee wanted to be at the King Roadhouse. You know, there was graduation parties and the students were partying because they were getting ready to go home for the winter break. So it seems as though this is when Kaylee would really want to be around all of her friends at the King Roadhouse, all of her friends in that area. So it's just always seemed odd to me that she moved out during that time. I mean, she still had a final to take at the University of Idaho before she graduated. So it seems like this would have been a time when all of these students would have wanted to be in the house celebrating their accomplishments. But she didn't. She moved out. So that's always struck me as being kind of odd. Now, I'm sure that Kaylee had her reasons. Now, Kaylee's mom, Christy Gonzalez, also stated that Kaylee was contemplating whether to even go back that weekend. You know, so why would she be hesitant to go back to the house unless something was going on over there? You know, why wouldn't she want to be around the house? It just seems strange that she would have to talk herself into going back, and finally did, because she wanted to show Maddie her new car. Notice how Kaylee and Maddie were on their own on that Saturday night. Well, they had Jack S. with them because he was watching over the girls all night. He was basically protecting them, which kind of tells me that maybe Jack S. knew that something was up. I just always thought it was kind of strange that Kaylee and Maddie were out that night and Jack S. was basically just watching over them, protecting them. So think about all these pieces. Kaylee breaks up with Jack D., who lives right down the street from the King Roadhouse. After they break up, she moves out of the King Roadhouse. She still has her belongings in the house, but she moves away and moves out of that neighborhood. Then she's hesitant to go back. Christy Gonzalez makes it sound like she really didn't want to go back to the King Roadhouse, but she talks herself into it so she can show Maddie her new car. Notice how when Kaylee and Maddie are at the corner club on the security cam footage and they're talking to Jack D, that Jack S is not part of this conversation. He's just kind of standing off to the side in the back, but he's still keeping a very close eye on the girls. So he wasn't a part of this conversation. He wasn't a part of their night out, really. You know, if you notice throughout the night in the footage, he just kind of hangs back and keeps an eye on them, which is odd. It's almost like he knew that they were in danger. When the girls and Jack S. leave the corner club just before 2 a.m., they leave without Jack D. They leave him sitting at the bar. And on their way to the grub truck, Maddie tells Kaylee that she told Adam everything. So what did she tell Adam? I think she told Adam why Kaylee had moved out of the King Roadhouse and why she hadn't been around. And I think that it had something to do with her breakup with Jack D. I think that this is what Maddie was telling Adam, is that maybe Kaylee was having some problems with Jack D because Adam was Jack D's roommate. So it's very possible that this is what Maddie was talking about. It's also very possible that Maddie told Adam during this conversation that Kaylee was dating. And of course, Adam is going to tell Jack D. That's his friend. That's his roommate. So I think that's a possibility, that this is when Jack D maybe finds out that Kaylee is dating other people. Because you have to remember, Kaylee hasn't been around. She moved away from the King Roadhouse. So it's very possible that this is the first that Jack D has heard about Kaylee dating. Now, after the girls return home to the King Roadhouse, Kaylee calls Jack 10 times. So, one right after another. That's every 2.5 minutes. 10 times in 26 minutes. And she had just been standing in front of him at the corner club less than 45 minutes before that. So I would be curious to know if there were any incoming calls on Kaylee and Maddie's phones from Jack D before they started calling him repeatedly. It just seems strange that they would call him that many times and that he wouldn't answer. They were having problems, but they'd been together for 5 years. So it seems as though if they were calling over and over and over 10 times within 26 minutes, that Jack D might think, that something was really wrong and maybe would need to answer, regardless of whether him and Kaylee were having problems or not. But he didn't do that. I would be curious to know if he even called them back that morning after, because law enforcement wasn't called until noon on that Sunday. So it seems like Jack D may have already woken up and seen all these calls, all these missed calls, if sleeping was what he was doing, and called them back. I wonder if he did call them back. So it seems like these are issues that Kaylee may have been dealing with leading up to these crimes. I'm not saying that Jack D is guilty of anything, but there was some friction there. Jack D and Kaylee had been together for 5 years. They were high school sweethearts. Jack D was hurt about the breakup, and Kaylee had moved away from the house. So it's very possible that could be because of Jack D. He was basically their neighbor. We know that Ethan and Xana got into it with Ethan's frat brothers at the Sigma Chi house, at the party that happened the night of the crimes. So these are all things that are going on that are leading up to these crimes. Like I said, not saying that they had anything to do with these crimes, but I'm saying that it's noteworthy to, any type of friction or animosity toward these victims, in my opinion, should be looked at. So we know that Ethan and Xana got into a fight at the Sigma Chi house at a party the night that these crimes happened. And in my opinion, I believe that this is when Ethan and Xana left the fraternity house. And I believe that this is why law enforcement was desperately seeking, asking people about the whereabouts of Ethan and Xana between 9 p.m. and 1:45 a.m. They were asking if anybody had given them a ride or had been in a car with them, driving somewhere. So I do think that it's very possible. I know that it says in the PCA that Ethan and Xana were at this party until 1:45 a.m. But weeks and weeks after these crimes occurred, law enforcement was still looking for the whereabouts of Ethan and Xana between 9 and 1:45. So I do believe that's very telling. I believe that Ethan and Xana left the fraternity party. And who knows where they went after that. But law enforcement was looking for their whereabouts. They didn't know that Ethan and Xana were at the Sigma Chi house until 1:45. I just think it's strange that Ethan and Xana get into a fight the night that these crimes occur, and a few hours later, their lives are brutally taken. That, in my opinion, is something that should be looked at. Now, I just don't believe that someone committed this crime on their own. I believe that there were multiple people, and it may have been for multiple reasons. The mayor came out in his first press conference, and he said this was a crime of passion. Why would he say that? Did he just pull that out of the air and decide to relay that to the public? Or was he told that? I just don't see the mayor coming out and saying, telling everybody the motivation that this was a crime of passion if somebody hadn't already told him that. In my opinion, these crimes were carried out in a very personal manner. Very personal. Which in my opinion indicates that this would have been someone or multiple people who knew these victims and had a personal axe to grind with these roommates. The way that the injuries are described are very personal. Someone who was taking out their anger on these victims. And why would they inflict more damage on one of the roommates, as opposed to all of the others? Why did one of the victims suffer a lot worse injuries? If it wasn't somebody that had a personal vendetta with this individual. That's just what I don't understand. Now, another thing that makes me believe that this was someone who knew these victims is the crime scene. How did this individual not leave any footprints or handprints? Maybe they did, and law enforcement just isn't telling us about that. But why would they just tell us about this touch DNA on this knife sheath? Which, in my opinion, I look at the knife sheath as something that isn't very solid because it's something that could have been brought into the house. It's something that could have come from anywhere. So other than the knife sheath that could have come from anywhere, how did this attacker not leave any sort of solid evidence? How did this attacker not leave any footprints, any handprints, any hair? How did this attacker walk out of the house with their mask still on if they had just been in one hell of a battle? It just all seems too easy for this perpetrator to get in and out. And in my opinion, that's an indication that this individual knew these people and knew this house, that they were familiar with this person or people. That's why it looks suspicious. That's why it looks like someone who knew the people in this house carried out these crimes. This crime scene was described as being very messy. And it would make sense. 4 people lost their lives to someone with a knife. So it makes sense that it would be a very messy crime scene. So there should have been footprints coming from the upstairs, coming from Maddie's room, all down the stairs, across the house to Xana's bedroom, back out of that hall, back across the house, in front of Dylan's bedroom door, through the kitchen, and out onto the back patio. There should have been footprints everywhere. There should have been handprints. So where was all of this evidence? Why, if there was all of this evidence and law enforcement has this, why were we just told about the touch DNA on the knife sheath? You know, if there was all of this, if this crime scene was such a mess, why didn't Dylan and Bethany recognize this as soon as they opened their bedroom door? The smell alone is something that they would have recognized right away. So why were they even trying to get into a door, get into Xana's bedroom door, or, calling people over to the house? As soon as Dylan walked out of her bedroom door, she should have seen evidence. She should have seen body fluid everywhere. So why didn't that happen? As far as we know, there were no eyewitnesses that can positively identify whoever committed these crimes. They got in and out of this house without being seen. Well, Dylan claims that she saw a man walk past her door, but she can't identify him other than that he was 5'10 plus and had bushy eyebrows. He had a slim build. So she could see through his clothing, or she could see his build by the way that he was dressed. But there was no positive ID. So this person gets in and out of this house after committing a quadruple homicide with a knife, and there's no trail. To me, that's odd. And to me, that would require whoever committed these crimes to possibly know the people who lived in this house, along with Dylan and Bethany. It's very possible that these crimes could have been committed by people who knew these victims very well, and people who these victims knew. Maybe these victims even trusted whoever committed these crimes. I just don't feel like this is a random type of crime. I feel like there were some issues that were going on with these roommates leading up to these crimes. I feel like it's very telling that Kaylee moved out of the house, weeks before graduation. I think that it says a lot that Kaylee moved out of the King Roadhouse when all of the students would have been partying and celebrating. Kaylee moved out, and I don't believe that it's a coincidence that she moved out right after she broke up with Jack D. I think it's very possible that there was something going on there. I also think it's very possible that Jack D didn't know that Kaylee was dating until the night of the crimes. I think that this is maybe when he found out, and maybe he found out because Maddie told Adam everything. I think that's a big possibility. There was a fight between Ethan and Xana at the fraternity house right before they lose their lives. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot to piece together. But if you look at all of these pieces, it makes a lot of sense that it's very possible that these crimes were committed by someone who was close to these victims. I just feel like, with everything that's been talked about, that we've kind of gotten away from what's right in front of us. These people, Jack D, the fraternity brothers, Jack S, anyone who was around these victims right before they lost their lives should have been looked at very, very closely. I feel like their alibis were cleared quickly. And these were people that were around these victims right before they lost their lives. And these were things that were going on with these victims and the people around them. So, as I said, I can't really say that anybody's guilty. Because right now in the Idaho 4 crimes, everyone is still innocent. Nobody has been found guilty, not even Brian Koberger. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Like I said, I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.